I am aware that my friend, the President of Kenya, has decided in his democratic right to support my competitor, and I respect the opinion and the decision of my friend, the President, but I also know that the President of Kenya is not my competitor. My competitor is Mr. Kitendawili. And therefore, I ask Mr. Kitendawili not to hide behind President Uhuru Kenyatta. He must step forward and compete with me. I also know clearly that I have an agenda and I have a plan, and we are a team. And we have a plan for the people of Kenya. And on top of that, we have a track record that the people of Kenya will look at. And I am also aware that the people of Kenya will decide. The 45 million, almost 50 million people in Kenya will decide who the next leader of our country will be.
So a very interesting departure from what we saw just a few weeks ago. You remember after the president spoke in Mombasa during the launch of the UHC, where he began to give indications he will jump into the fray, he will be going out to say a few things. He went directly at his deputy, and the next set of rallies, Linus, were quite animated, and they went directly for the president. But we see the deputy president going back to what he was doing there before, trying to create this separation between the president and the ODM leader Raila Odinga, and finding it necessary to emphasize that, hey, this is not between me and the president. I respect what he said, but this is a contest between me and Raila Odinga. A very interesting distinction there the deputy president is making, and perhaps for good reason.
I actually see no distinction. What I see is a continuation of a style that lacks consistency on the part of the deputy president on how to handle Uhuru Kenyatta. You can tell that he swings from going on the attack and treating him nicely. It's a seesaw game, and it depends on the situation. If you remember, just a few days ago in a rally that was held in Baringo, it was all attack mode. And what are they saying in the rallies? They are saying they have smoked out. They have smoked out the owners of Azimio. And that is after the president's response to the attacks in Mombasa. Remember, he spoke in Mombasa during a tour there, and
at State House.
And at State House. And they said, now, we have smoked him out. So the DP blows hot and cold when it comes to how to handle Uhuru Kenyatta. And the problem is that consistency has taken a lot of time. It's actually been about 4 years, because one time he would say the party has been destroyed by the handshake. It is the Jamaa of Vitendawili that has destroyed it. And then he would then say, ndugu yangu should stop. I was with him and all that. He needed to have a more consistent approach. And one of the things that you cannot do is a frontal confrontation with the president. What will certainly come out as a fact right now is Sagana was a big hammer in terms of how President Kenyatta now hit his deputy. And I know the analysis going forward, it started here yesterday when you saw the JKL conversation between the two lawyers from those supporting Azimio and those supporting Kenya Kwanza. The conversation is already on what is the impact of Sagana on Deputy President William Ruto's fortunes. He spoke today and said, no impact. It is inconsequential. But is it true? One should doubt that, because this is his boss. In a way, this is the recommendation letter he's writing for Ruto in Mount Kenya region. And he is saying, subject to behavior change, don't consider subject, you will consider only subject to behavior change, and it's later, it's not now, which in itself is a blow to at least the 2022 plan. So you cannot entirely say this is inconsequential. The second reason it's not inconsequential is politics in Kenya is regional. And even the DP knows it. Just the same way you cannot really dislodge the DP in his bases in Rift Valley, is the same way you cannot also dislodge Uhuru Kenyatta from his base in Mount Kenya. Just the same way, for example, Maasai leaders, of course, will hold sway also in their regions, Luhya as well, and all that. Politics in Kenya is very, very regional. You cannot disregard the leadership, the local leadership, and go with this strategy which the DP has adopted of going directly. It is a gamble, and like I said previously in this show, it's a gamble that never worked before. We want to see whether it works in 2022. It will be interesting to see.
Joe, I would say caution. The response by the Deputy President today was very cautious. Cautious because if he was to take on the President head-on, it has its own repercussions. And the Deputy President has avoided a scenario where he would be seen to be in a direct confrontation with the President, because it would attract a question of why is he doing it? Is he disrespectful of the President? So, but you will see the Deputy President has maintained a very cautious and respectful way of dealing with the President. If you, and I say respectful very, very cautiously also, because you will not see any scenario where the Deputy President will say bad things or in an abusive manner respond to the President. Even when he wants to disagree with him, he will try in a roundabout way to do it. I think the closest I've seen him openly disagree with him the other day when we were in Kirinyaga. I remember the...
Mayor or something.
Yeah, I remember him saying, I have voted for the President, but on this one, on the project one, I will disagree with him. See, there is no doubt as to who the President supports. It has not been in doubt. And number two, the people who will respond to the President will largely be members of Parliament allied to the Deputy President, but from the Mount Kenya region. Like, basically, let them take on one of their own and not the Deputy President. So it's a cautious way of doing it. You will still do what he will still do what he needed to do, but in a roundabout way, if you may like it. And it's a matter of caution, because it can be interpreted either way if he was to face the President direct. Look, when the Deputy President was expressing his misgivings with the handshake, he blamed, or he has consistently blamed, the ODM leader. But see, this handshake has two hands, the President's and the ODM leaders. So the handshake cannot be bad when you're talking about the ODM leader, because on the other hand in that handshake is the President. So if the handshake is bad, then it means the initiators of that handshake, the President and the ODM leader, are also equally to be blamed. So it's a way of hammering the ODM leader while directing that attack at the President.
So Yvonne, this thing also came down to the economic record, because the President spoke a lot about it, spoke about the size of the economy now, but he also spoke about who was leading what ministry at what time. In a sense, he had this is my record, and this is what has gone wrong. What did you read the President to be doing with having this whole, I don't know, is it a PowerPoint presentation or whatever it was, but he was there saying, they have told you this is what the picture looks like.
One, countering the Deputy President's foray into Mount Kenya region, which we know he has done, and the growing disquiet from residents of the region who have said, well, how much have you done for us, even as you leave? That's number two. Number three, he also, as we have seen, wanted to distinguish between his first term, 2013 to 2017, and his second term, 2017 to date, to try and show how much work was done then, in essence, again, painting the picture that, you know, in that first term, which is why he brought up Aurora and Kimwarer, in that first term, that, you know, things were not as good, but a lot has been achieved in, you know, from 2018 essentially to date. Even talking about the size of the economy that he has now built since 2013, it was about, what, 1 trillion, 1.2, and that now whoever it'll come after him will inherit a 13 trillion economy. But it was really keen on painting that, you know, development record in central Kenya, in the Mount Kenya region, so as to say, this is what I have done, together with, or rather, you know, with the support of Raila Odinga since the handshake. I want us to listen to a couple of them that seemed to be very direct. Again, politics, you know, was at play here. And he talked about, you know, the agriculture ministry and who was in charge. Let's listen to where he says, you know, that Ruto was leading the agricultural ministry since 2013. You know, if we can hear that, and then also talk about how he said no president before him has done what he's done.
Viongozi kulima no koletu atogoretie wizara ya kilimo neo kana nenie neguo mwaka umwe na nuthu wa mwanake uyu neguo kahua ne gacokia bia aremi a macani ne magia fertilizer neguo na bei ya mucere ne hacite na nio maragunika mucoke ha mutwire mwoga guthondeka kuria mwarimirwo ni guthondeka miaka yothe mwaturaga kuu bakiandigeire ni economy ya milioni trilioni 5 neguo umuthi uria nganengera thirikari ngamon na ni we ucio uria nganengera thirikari neguo githendia mwera Kibaki andigeire ni economy ya trilioni cigana neguo uria nie nganengera thirikari na ni mwamugweta neguo ngamutigira economy ya trilioni 13 mucoke muge ati wira timurute ati wira timurute ithano ngamunengera economy ya trilioni 16 sorry 13 13 trillion iyo nio economy ya gatigira munene uri oroka macoke matinde makiaria ha ati tondu matiracokeria omothe ni ngumacokeria na ni ngumera hata shida zile zote nimekuwa nazo hakuna rais ambaye ametembea mbele yangu ambaye amefanya yale mimi nimefanya kwa taifa la Kenya. Hakuna moja. Hiyo mimi sikuchukia wale wameenda mbele, ni kusema tu uhaki. Ndio haya yale ambaye yanaonekana.
So one, he refers to Deputy President's time as Minister for Agriculture. 2, he wants to show the people of Central Kenya what he's done for them. 3, he's painting his legacy, which typically is usually something that is said by other people of your legacy, but he was very keen to put that up. In fact, at one point, he actually had CS Munya, CS Munya rise up and said, you know, of the 1.5 years or so that he's been in charge, you know, he talked about the coffee, the tea industries, which have been problematic for the farmers in Mount Kenya. I think in the next few days we should do quite a bit of fact-checking on what was said, including the Thiba Dam that he said is, you know, will now be operational, water will be flowing into it. But you could also see an attempt at solidifying his legacy. You know, this is what I have done, you know, over time. But you know, time is something else that will tell us what's really going on.
And you could tell that was something that was eating him up, because he went there to all out. I mean, there was somebody making presentations.
Andrew Akahiu,
the Secretary of Presidential Delivery Unit.
Yep.
And he's saying all these things, Linus, about what he believes he has done. Some people have an argument about The size of the economy, well, that's one metric to measure, but there are many other things. But basically, you could tell that he was on a mission to do a couple of things, one of them being to say, you've been told a lot of things that have done nothing. Here is what I have done.
True, and this is definitely related to the fact that very soon he'll be leaving office and he is concerned about his legacy. What will people say? What will history say about his term? And when you look at this, when an audit is done of the joint collective Uhuruto term, Kenyans might actually get shocked, especially by what should pass as a wasted first term. Wasted in terms of if the president knew all these things, he did nothing about it. And why didn't he do anything about it? Because of politics. Because, and we always say this, that he definitely was interested in keeping the voting base intact for 2017. And so you don't rattle things that much until you cross the bridge. And you remember, I think it was David Murathe who said in the second term, the president will be himself. Because definitely they were referring to the fact that there is so much that political survival could not allow to happen in the first term. I mean, let's not forget, by November 2014, just a year into office, within the Jubilee administration itself, there were murmurs and complaints about extortion of parastatal chiefs by, among others, a team that used to call itself the Sky Team. If you remember the Sky Team. And I think at least two senior officials in the administration went public to reveal that indeed they have received complaints that the Sky Team was asking for money from parastatal chiefs, for donations. They are also acting as fixers. Basically, the first term of Jubilee, the first term of Uhuruto, was as bad as a wartime term for the country, because the looting was that actually that much. I know we talk of these grand projects like Aror Kimorer, but do we know how much was going on in a smaller scale through individuals, through members of parliament, through people who are peddling power? Just the fact that they have come to office, they were on a looting spree. If Yvonne, you like talking about the lifestyle audit. If a lifestyle audit was to be done right across for all elected members of parliament at the time, all elected senators, maybe even administrators who are taking positions in government, what would it have revealed about them before and after coming to office? The first term of Jubilee is a case study, really, on how a country should not be run. That is a time where we had all these corruption scandals. But like I keep insisting, what about the small scale individual influence peddlers? And there are very many. You could see them very, very active on Twitter, very active in their arrogance in how they basically respond to criticism of government. The first term was a forgettable term, Joe.
And Joe, it was not going to be possible to conduct that lifestyle audit. It was going to be frustrated thoroughly, because if it was to be conducted, it would have affected very many people from, across the political divide. And let's be blunt here. The 2013 to 2017 Jubilee administration was a coalition. So there were two sides of it. The president was talking about how even the government was shared. I mean, there can't be talk of sharing government if it is one unitary institution. The talk of sharing government by and itself denotes a coalition. Two sides coming together, have your half of the cake, the other one has half of his cake. And
they went literal on the cake.
Yeah, absolutely. When you hear the president talk about the Ministry of Agriculture, for example, ni nani walikuwa nayo, and he is the head of that government, so it denotes that I had this government that was split into two. That is what LK keeps referring to as a shared presidency then, or talk of a shared presidency. And so that explains why that lifestyle audit was not going to be successful, because it would have touched almost entirely, you know, how the government works. But at the same time, it is important to look at what the president was responding to in Sagana yesterday. He gave what I would call a regional scorecard to respond to an accusation that he neglected the region that overwhelmingly voted for him. One of the discussions, especially by members of parliament from the Mount Kenya region, allied to the deputy president, has been that the president forgot about his region, that it was during his tenure that coffee, tea, milk, those key cash crops were affected. And they also say that it is during Uhuru's term as president that quite a number of people from the region suffered financially, even going to the extent of comparing his term and that of retired President Mwai Kibaki. And that is exactly what the president was trying to respond to yesterday, that during Kibaki's time, this is what was done. During my term, this is what has been done. So compare the previous president and the current presidency and see how much work has been done between the two terms. And that's why he was saying he has done more than his predecessors combined. Lastly, there was this narrative that very little work has been done in the second term, and especially after 2018, the handshake. Andrew Wakahio, the secretary of PDU, was trying to explain what has been done before the handshake and what has been done after the handshake. So basically, I listened to the president and the presentation by his PDU secretary. It was like trying to separate what has been said with what he says has been done. Okay.
We have been on that mountain called Mount Kenya for a bit too long. I think we need to come, but go to something that again is as high as the peak of Mount Kenya, which is our ballooning national debt. And I think that we have seen very interesting things. You know, talk about politics getting in the way of everything in this country. This week, Yvonne, we couldn't even agree on how much debt we have in this country. On the one hand, you had Kenya Kwanza, and I think we could listen to Musalia Mudavadi in a second. But you had Kenya Kwanza basically giving a figure, I think it was 11 trillion. 11.5, and later on the budget committee, Kanini Kega, basically saying it was
8.6.
3 billion less than that.
Yeah.
Let's listen to Musalia Mudavadi.
Is this: was the handshake a license to burdening Kenyans with punitive public debt, punitive taxation, punitive food prices, and a high cost of living? The Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury should not sign any new loans, including floating sovereign bonds, during this transition period.
All right, so there we are, Yvonne.
That's right. Take a look at some of these graphics that we have for you on the screen. I think that matter was settled here in a great conversation that Trevor Mbija hosted on Monday Report with some two top economists in this country, you know, where our situation is right now. Joy Kiru and Kwame Owino. So this is what it was like now that, you know, the president has invited us into a comparison of what happened when he took office and to date. In 2013, our debt was 1.82 trillion shillings. As of December last year, it was 8.2 trillion shillings. I mean, a lot has happened in that time in terms of what has been borrowed. Now, for every 100 shillings in this country that we collect as revenue, 68 shillings goes to paying debt. That leaves us with 32 shillings that will go to revenue, to recurrent expenditure, to paying our salaries. And remember, there's no, you know, and speaking about development as well. This is the picture. Also, if you take a look at the food prices, if you see on your screen, they have consistently gone up, including the price of electricity that has gone up by quite a high percentage. So this is where we find ourselves at. But for me, I think the issue with this conversation on the country's debt situation is how everybody's blaming the other side, considering that all of these people actually sit in Parliament. How many MPs does ANC have? About 26 or 25. All of them have been in this situation. And how did we get here? We have chosen commercial loans over concessional ones. We have rebased our economy. Kenya has continued to be a net importer of many of the goods that we bring in. Even the IMF and the Parliamentary Budget Office are all saying our debt is too high. That is affecting many of us there. But I think, like we put in the explainer a little earlier, Parliament has the single role of oversighting the executive spending and is the one that sets the debt ceiling. So a lot of these MPs in Azimio, in Kenya Kwanza, in One Kenya Alliance, in whatever political divide, are all collectively responsible for where we find ourselves now. Which is why I think it is also important, even as we continue to focus on what's happening at the presidential level, that a lot needs to be focused on our MPs at this point, because it doesn't matter who you have at the presidential level, but if you have somebody, a parliament that has largely, as we have seen, played to the tune of the executive for the first term, largely, and for the second term, if you have a strong parliament, then it doesn't matter who would be president. And so I think collectively, all of the politicians who are speaking on the issue of debt in the country all have to answer to Kenyans for how we got here, because they're all equally responsible.
But Linus, who's listening? I mean, perhaps the person who shouts the loudest is the one who will get the attention of Kenyans. I'm not sure how many people are going into the ins and outs of this debt thing. It's actually been lost in the din of politics. So now just another political issue like anything else that you can find on the campaign trail. Even if it's it can be quite a technical issue, the various steps that one goes through and all things that go into this debt question.
Absolutely. It's no longer a technical issue. It's actually just a campaign tool. And there is a lot of hypocrisy around it. And I want to agree with Yvonne here, especially on the role of Parliament. What the Constitution envisaged is an independent is a situation where the executive can be held accountable by the legislature. When the Constitution created the position of majority leader, they were not creating a poodle for State House, which is what majority leaders in this country have been. If you think majority leaders, try and compare our majority leaders with the majority leaders in the US. Do our majority leaders, when they actually go to those parliamentary visits, can they call those American majority leaders their colleagues? They're completely different. They're completely operating at different levels. A majority leader in the US can hold the president almost at ransom, if I can put it that way. They must have conversations that are very substantive on budget.
Difficult conversations.
Very difficult conversations. The president in the US has to negotiate with the parliamentary leaders. That is the majority leader, the minority leader. You also need the whips and all that, and convince them that this is the agenda of the executive. We intend to deliver this for the next period. And you have to negotiate your way around that. And a majority leader, the parliament must have that voice. It's been 10 years of the Constitution of Kenya 2010. The structures it proposes are really ambitious. But we can't approach the Constitution of Kenya 2010 with a single party mentality, where directions basically, this parliament, and I mean both houses, the Senate and the National Assembly, they are both run from State House. That is not what the Constitution envisaged. The Constitution envisaged that there'll be people of substance, adults capable of holding each other accountable, capable of working through technical issues like budget-making process, keeping the executive on check on issues like the national debt. That is not happening. Everything they show is run from the same place, same as we've always done even under the old Constitution. So when I see MPs pretending this time to now question the national debt, we're really in a hole as far as even the institutional side of things is concerned, because we need to start transitioning to an environment that people occupying those offices, when you are the majority leader, when you are the speaker of of the National Assembly, Speaker of the Senate. Those are very powerful positions. And you're not just waiting there to become president in terms of the, the chain that is normally given. You are actually a person that can make a contribution to the institutional wellness of the institution that you lead. I think for me, the issue of national debt is proof of failure of institutions that include the houses of parliament, that is the Senate and the National Assembly.
And Francis, the contradictions were spectacular this week. I mean, if you think about all the politicians on both sides of the divide who were speaking this week, if you think about the people, for example, in Kenya Kwanza, literally all of them have supported this thing. They were on the front line. If you think about Eden Duale, he was a majority leader. The DP himself defended, even here on our set, defended this, talking about how this was a responsible government, and they were not just borrowing as child's play. But then look at Raila Odinga. He talked about over-borrowing, overspending, and that sort of thing. And this week he was there justifying, like, borrowing has to happen. A government cannot. I mean, it is just mind-boggling how all these people, within a space of just a few years, are speaking from both sides of their mouths, and we are here trying to make a decision on what to do with them come August 9th.
Yep.
Joe, are you not the same person who told us not so long ago that where you sit
determines
where you stand?
Yeah.
Precisely. You see, I would call this the politics of debt. Whichever side of the political divide you're in informs what you will say about the debt. If the Uhuru-Ruto relationship was still intact, what the MPs allied to the deputy president are saying now about debt, they would be saying something very different.
Sure.
Those supporting the handshake today, if there was no handshake, if the acrimony was still there between the president and the former prime minister, what they are saying today about the debt situation, they would be saying something very different. So where they sit now determines where they stand on matters debt. Number one. Number two, as Linus aptly puts it, Parliament has a key role in budget making. It has a key role on the question of borrowing, locally and internationally. The budget-making process of yesteryears is gone. We have a new way of doing things, and Parliament has a key role in that process. So there's no surprise. No member of Parliament can act surprised that, the debt levels have reached this high. It's something they know, they have interacted with, have been part of it, have approved. Yeah. So they know it. And they can join us or can join the public in lamenting when they have a key role to play in determining how that debt level remains. Number three, even this budget that they're currently talking about, I mean, there's a budget policy statement in the House currently. It was retabled. Certainly, there will be more borrowing to finance the 2022-2023 budget. Certainly. Why? Because if, as at December last year, the debt level was at 8.2 trillion. Between then and now, some more money has been borrowed. So you're talking about 8.6 or thereabout. If the ceiling was 9 trillion,
we have 400 billion.
And you have a budget of 3.3 trillion and an expected revenue of about 2.4, you have a whole gaping hole of more than 800 billion shillings.
Actually, it's closer to 1 trillion.
Almost closer to a trillion. So even if you're to look at the numbers strictly, if you're talking about 850, close to 850 billion, and the ceiling remains with only about 400 billion, it means certainly you will have to borrow more than 400 billion to finance the 2022-2023 budget. And Parliament, in one way or another, will still approve it. There was a proposal by the CS National Treasury to raise that to about 12 trillion. And you will see it passing because I mean, there is the politics and there is the reality.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to add that after Kenya's Constitution 2010, never before have we had a more powerful and more well-resourced parliament to handle matters of budget, economy and debt in this country. The PFM Act of 2012 literally gives parliament the power to decide we will not do this project, we will do this one, this is where we'll borrow from, domestic, internationally, this is why, this is how much. That's number one. The Constitution of Kenya also does that in Article 95. And so Parliament cannot run away from that. In 2014, they were the ones who raised the debt ceiling. In 2019 as well, and all of the times they have done that to get us to where we are today. That is why I believe, in as much as we are all focused on Raila, Ruto, Kalonzo, whoever will be president, the real battle for me should be, who our MPs are, because they represent us with these matters. So if we want to shout about a high debt situation in the country, about high food prices, guess who's responsible for that? Guess who actually puts executive in check? It is the members of parliament, and that is where the buck stops, and that is where we should be focusing our eyes on who will represent us in our constituencies after August 9th.
Linus, you'll have the last word.
Sure. And my last word is this saving grace in all this, and that is the back-end team, the backroom team of technocrats that we have in this country. The unsung heroes who sit in those budget offices. Some sit in Treasury, some
the Parliamentary Budget Office.
Parliamentary Budget
Very
Office.
Good people there. Yeah.
We have amazing and very able civil servants who keep things sane. Because if this was left to the politicians, it would have been worse than it is right now. And that's something that always really gives me hope about this country. And I want to digress a bit and even refer to, say, the COVID-19 crisis management, because you get to interact with the technocrats, the teams that are behind those who are in front of cameras. And we have amazing Kenyans out there. And they are there in the budget office in Parliament. They are there in the budget office in Treasury. They are there in the Central Bank of Kenya. We have thinkers, civil servants who are actually trying to keep it sane. If it were not for them, even the parliamentary teams, you're talking of the clerk and his team that really manages the paperwork for the House. These are teams that we need to really celebrate as heroes, because the political end of things is very chaotic, which is why I really wish sometimes we just kept things as we had inherited from the British, which is separate the public service from the politics, so that politicians can come in and the country really doesn't fall because of decisions that have been made by a passing cloud of politicians.
One question for Linus. Very good job done by these public servants, the Parliamentary Budget Office and everybody else. But who listens to them? Who? They have advised, but who takes their advice? And that's why we find ourselves where we are.
You know, the rate at which politicians like associating themselves with things, launching toilets and all kinds of things, I wonder what would happen if they actually did half of what those technocrats are doing. We would never hear the end of it.
That's right. We need to take the show home now. And today, who do we begin with? Joe's angle starts us off.
I was angling for the start. Yeah.